ティックなタクティクス。
あれって
究極の最高傑作を。
Hey everyone, it's Mark. This is my recap for Pokémon Horizons episode 10, Nemona and Brassius. This was the 1242nd episode of the Pokémon anime and the closest thing we've gotten to a gym battle so far. Let's talk about what happened. The episode opens with Liko and Roy arriving in Artisan, and there was no sign of the rest of the Rising Voltaclers for most of this episode. They didn't exactly explain why, but Liko and Roy went on their own for this mission. One interesting thing to note is that Free doesn't have to follow Liko around anymore since he's not getting paid to be her bodyguard anymore. Liko is now a fully fledged member of the Rising Voltaclers, and her and Roy explore the town before investigating some Sunflora that have caught Fuecoco's attention, including a sculpture that was made by Brassius, and remember, they came to Artisan in order to meet Brassius. Speaking of which, we cut to Brassius alone in his art studio, and we see that he's sculpting a shiny Rayquaza. More on that later as we see Liko and Roy walking around town when they hear someone shout Nemona's name off in the distance. Sure enough, Nemona is having a battle in front of the Artisan gym, and she pretty much wipes the floor with this random kid. This catches Roy's eye, so he runs up to Nemona immediately. I think it's interesting to note that Roy isn't necessarily starstruck by Nemona. I think he just genuinely reacts this way to any Pokemon battle, that's all. He's never even been outside of his small island in Kanto, so how could he have even known of who this Paldean trainer is? In classic Nemona fashion, she skips all the pleasantries and just challenges them to a battle right away, but Liko and Roy don't want that smoke. They explain that they're looking for Brassius, and Nemona takes the two of them to his home and art studio. I have to say, they really nailed Nemona's enthusiasm in the anime. She is pretty spot on to her game counterpart. She explains that Brassius is not just an artist, but also the Artisan gym leader, and she explains to the two kids that he can reach champion rank if you defeat all the Paldea gym leaders. And I just enjoyed how Liko and Roy reacted to Nemona's overbearing enthusiasm for battling. Anyways, the cogs are turning in Liko's brain. She's finally put two and two together that this is actually the champion-ranked trainer Nemona, and now she is starstruck by meeting someone so famous. Moving on, Nemona explains that she came to talk to Brassius because he's been away from the gym for a while, and local kids have been gathering up Sunflora in order to try and make Brassius happy, since apparently Sunflora symbolizes the sun and smiles, or something like that. They hear something from around the corner, and it turns out to be Brassius smashing his latest artwork, and Nemona tries to talk to him, but yeah, Brassius isn't exactly in an upbeat kind of mood. Liko is incredibly nervous, and in a panic, she explains that her father is a painter and told her to come find Brassius in Artisan. This perks Brassius up. He is clearly familiar with Liko's father. Brassius invites them all inside his house, where his Dolliv accidentally got oil all over Nemona's Palmo. Sprigatito runs over to try to calm Dolliv down with its scent and is successful in cheering it up. Dolliv is now so happy that it lets off another splash of oil in its excitement, which once again completely soaks Nemona's Palmo. Roy gets everyone back on track, and he just goes straight into asking about the Black Rayquaza. Brassius is thrown off by this, so much so that he flips out and walks away, saying farewell to the kids. We see him walk back down into his art studio, where he has been smashing up more of his art, including parts of that Rayquaza sculpture. Our heroes now have absolutely no idea what to do until Liko notices some of the smashed Rayquaza sculpture over in the corner. Not sure how it got there, but whatever. Somehow, this is enough for Liko to deduce that Brassius must be going through a slump, which is basically just writer's block, but for an artist. Liko continues by explaining that this happens to her father sometimes, and he usually eats tasty food and does things to make him smile in order to break himself out of a slump. I'd love to make a joke about the baseball meaning of the term slump buster, but if you know, you know. Getting back on topic, Roy suggests that they gather up a ton of Sunflora in order to make Brassius smile, and so the three of them head back out into town in order to gather up the Sunflora. This plays out pretty much exactly like the Artisan gym test from the games, although Brassius is keeping an eye on them while his adorable Dolliv is just concerned for its trainer. Liko ends up having to take a break when Sprigatito gets tired. This actually gives Liko an idea though, since Sprigatito loves to sunbathe, that this could actually lead her to more Sunflora. Sure enough, Liko gets a ton of Sunflora using this tactic, and the group is hopeful that this will make Brassius happy again. They turn around to find his Dolliv, who just blasts his trainer with oil since Dolliv didn't like the way Brassius was sulking around in the shadows. Our heroes try to break through to him, and they're successful. Brassius says he'll tell them why he's been feeling so down lately. He takes them back to his art studio where they are shocked to find his Rayquaza sculpture. Brassius explains that he took inspiration from Liko's father for this work. I have some questions about that, but whatever, let's just move on. Brassius admits that he actually saw the black Rayquaza, and in the most Brassius way possible, he explains that he saw it flying around at night in a nearby forest. He was completely overwhelmed by the sight of Rayquaza, and this is what caused him to leave his post at the gym and start struggling with his art. Roy breaks him out of his funk by complimenting the Rayquaza sculpture, saying that it's amazing and it makes him want to find Rayquaza even more. Brassius is like, hey kid, did you even hear a word I just said? But Roy goes as far as saying that Brassius' sculpture is as good as the real thing. This motivates Brassius, and if you haven't already picked up on this, he says avant-garde all the time, and for the less literate section of the audience, that term basically just means new or unusual in an artistic sense. But now's not the time for a vocabulary lesson because Brassius is challenging Roy to battle in order to test his skill. Straight to the battlefield we go, and yeah, this lunatic jumps off a windmill just like he does in the games. Gym Leader Brassius is well and truly back, everyone. He sends out his ace Sudowoodo, and Liko tries to warn Roy about it being a rock-type Pokemon, but this idiot cuts her off and is like, sweet, a grass-type, we've got the advantage, and calls for an Ember attack. Sudowoodo is completely unfazed by this and just fires off a rock throw in response, which lands massive damage as Roy and Fuecoco are both extremely rattled. Nemona explains that Sudowoodo is actually a rock type, and the battle rages on with Fuecoco dodging more rock throws as it closes in on Sudowoodo. Brassius keeps his calm and uses Substitute, which completely throws off Roy and Fuecoco once again. Roy decides to just guess and attack one of them, which predictably fails. Brassius starts trash talking and uses Substitute over and over again. Roy and Fuecoco can't handle this strategy, and Brassius keeps applying pressure by using Taunt, and this is actually the first time Taunt has ever been used in the history of the Pokemon anime. Fuecoco is enraged, and Roy has no idea what to do. Brassius' trash talk has transformed into advice at this point as he tells Roy to always pay attention to his own Pokemon. Sure enough, when he does look back at his own Pokemon, we see that Fuecoco is learning a new move. I guess its anger has really increased its power, so Roy tells Fuecoco to just give into that anger and go wild. Nemona points out that Fuecoco is learning the move Stomping Tantrum, and this actually works. Fuecoco's new move lands super effective damage on Sudowoodo, and Brassius is impressed with Roy's progress. So too is Nemona, who says that Roy's got talent. Things are only just starting to heat up though, as Brassius whips out his Terra Orb, and oh boy, here we go. He terastallizes his Sudowoodo, giving it the Grass Terra type. Brassius calls for Trailblaze, and this allows Sudowoodo to easily dodge an Ember attack before nailing Fuecoco with a direct hit, knocking it out, winning Brassius the battle. Roy is proud of Fuecoco for a job well done, and he's also really impressed by the way Brassius used terastallization. Nemona gives us the tutorial on how terastallization works, and Roy expresses interest in using it himself, but we don't get any follow-up on that for now. Instead, Brassius comes over to commend Roy for the way he battled, and he also admits that there's one other thing he should probably tell them. They go back down into his art studio for this, and he reveals a sculpture he calls the Forest Arboliva. Brassius explains that he was in the forest of the Arboliva when he saw Rayquaza, and that an Arboliva shone while Rayquaza was near, almost as if the two were connected in a way. This once again gets Liko's gears turning, and the episode wraps up with the two of them returning to the Bravasaki, where they explain their findings to the rest of the crew before Liko speculates about what the sculpture could mean. Elsewhere, in what I can only assume is the forest of the Arboliva that Brassius was talking about, we see two giant legs walking amongst the trees, and that's how the episode comes to an end. Alright, we're 10 episodes into Pokémon Horizons, and this was certainly a notable episode. It was pretty interesting watching Liko and Roy go off on their own adventure. The rest of the Rising Voltaclers were pretty much non-existent in this episode. Now, for me, this brings me incredible sadness due to the fact that we didn't even get to see Nidothing once, so I'm giving this episode a 1 out of 10 rating. Okay, not really, because I actually like this episode a lot. Seeing the trio of Liko, Roy, and Nemona together was amazing to see. I know a lot of people would have probably liked a Gen 9 anime based around these three traveling around Paldea doing the three storylines from the Scarlet and Violet games. I mean, you could have had Nemona take on Gyms, Liko investigating Team Star, and Roy battled the Titan Pokemon. The story almost writes itself. Instead, the Pokemon anime is going for an even bigger story, and I do appreciate that they're not just following the same formula from the games. With that said, the Scarlet and Violet games had an amazing story in my opinion, so I hope the anime is able to reach that level as well. Currently, the main plot of Pokémon Horizons is Liko and Roy investigating the Black Rayquaza and all the mysteries that come with it. It's still a little crazy to me that they travel to Artisan just based on some rumor they heard from Liko's father, and it's even more interesting that they're using dots drawing as if it's proof that Rayquaza is in Paldea. Of course, these vague clues actually did turn out to be true, although Liko and Roy still are not very close to their goal. Or should I say goals, plural, since Liko also wants to learn more about her pendant. If you look closely at Brassius' Terra Orb, the inside of it kind of looks like Liko's pendant to me. I don't really have a lot else to say about that specific detail, but I thought it was worth pointing out. Instead, let's talk about the battle between Brassius and Roy. I was pleasantly surprised to see Roy be the one to challenge Brassius. I thought it was just going to end up being an exhibition between Nemona and Brassius. Instead, we got to see Roy battle a Paldean gym leader, and this is already one more battle than I ever expected to see against a Paldean gym leader in this series. Like I mentioned before, Pokémon Horizons isn't going down the same path as the Scarlet and Violet game, so I have zero expectations for anyone to take on the gym challenge in this series. Nemona attempted to convince Liko and Roy to try it in this episode, and maybe she'll continue to push them down that road. We didn't really get any conclusion to Nemona's story in this episode, so she's obviously going to show up again at some point. Those are pretty much all of my thoughts about this episode, I guess. I mean, I could add in the fact that Dolliv is absolutely adorable, but that goes without saying. Since this episode did such a good job of advancing the plot, showing off Liko and Roy on their own without the Rising Voltacklers, and gave us a pretty solid battle, I'm giving this episode a 7 out of 10 rating. It wasn't the best episode ever, but it was very effective in its storytelling. Let me know what you thought about this episode down in the comments below. Let's take a look at what's coming up in the next episode, which is going to be about Liko and Roy investigating that forest where Brassius saw Rayquaza. It looks like Molly is going to be tagging along this time, and there's going to be a battle against this gigantic Arboliva. Like, I don't know if this is some kind of totem Pokemon or what, but it looks pretty crazy. I'm sure our heroes will be fine, so I can't wait to see what happens. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss my review next week, and go ahead and leave a like on this video before you click off. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.